One of the most difficult things for a narcissist to handle is silence. Most people believe that silence is passive, weak, or ineffective, but in reality, silence can be one of the strongest responses you can ever give. A narcissist thrives on reactions. Their entire system of control is built upon their ability to influence your emotions, shape your decisions, and keep you emotionally engaged. Whether the reaction is positive or negative does not matter. They simply need to know that they can still affect you. The moment you stop reacting, you begin disrupting the very foundation upon which their power is built. Think about it carefully. Why does a narcissist constantly create drama, arguments, misunderstandings, and emotional chaos? It is because these situations give them access to your attention. Every time you defend yourself, explain yourself, or try to prove your innocence, you are investing emotional energy into a game that was designed to exhaust you. The narcissist understands something that many people do not realize. Attention is power. The person who controls your attention often controls your emotions. That is why they work so hard to keep you focused on them. When you remain silent, however, something unusual begins to happen. You stop feeding the cycle. You stop providing the emotional fuel that keeps their manipulation alive. Suddenly, they are speaking, but the reaction they expected never comes. They criticize you, but you do not argue. They provoke you, but you do not respond. They attempt to draw you into conflict, but you refuse to participate. This creates a problem for them because the strategy that once worked is no longer producing results. Many people misunderstand silence. They think silence means doing nothing. In reality, silence is often an active decision. It is choosing self-control over emotional impulse. It is choosing wisdom over reaction. It is refusing to allow someone else to dictate your emotional state. Silence says, "I will not allow your behavior to determine my peace." That is not weakness. That is strength. The reason silence is so powerful is because it shifts the focus. Instead of spending all your energy reacting to the narcissist, you begin investing that energy into yourself. Your mind becomes clearer. Your emotions become more stable. You stop living in a constant state of defense. You stop feeling the need to justify every decision you make. You begin to understand that not every accusation deserves a response, and not every battle deserves your participation. Narcissists often become frustrated when they encounter silence, because silence removes their ability to predict and control the interaction. They have become accustomed to pushing a button and getting a reaction. They know which words trigger you. They know which fears to exploit. They know which insecurities to target. But when silence enters the situation, the buttons stop working. Their usual methods become ineffective. This uncertainty makes them uncomfortable because control thrives on predictability. There is another reason your silence becomes so disruptive. It communicates confidence. Even if you do not feel confident initially, your refusal to engage sends a powerful message. It tells the narcissist that their influence over you is weakening. It tells them that you are no longer willing to sacrifice your peace to satisfy their need for attention. It tells them that you are beginning to recognize your value. One of the greatest lessons you can learn in life is that you do not have to attend every argument you're invited to. You do not have to respond to every criticism. You do not have to defend yourself against every false accusation. Mature people understand that some conflicts are designed to drain you, not resolve anything. The narcissist often creates conversations where the goal is not understanding, but control. The more you participate, the deeper you become trapped. Silence breaks that trap. Silence interrupts the cycle. Silence creates space between you and the manipulation. Within that space, something remarkable begins to grow: clarity. You start seeing patterns that were previously hidden by emotional chaos. You begin recognizing manipulation tactics for what they truly are. You stop confusing drama with importance. You stop mistaking constant conflict for genuine communication. This does not mean silence is always easy. In fact, it can be extremely difficult. Every part of you may want to explain yourself, defend yourself, or prove that you are right. But growth often requires discipline. Emotional maturity is not the ability to win every argument. It is the ability to recognize when an argument is not worth having. Sometimes the strongest statement you can make is no statement at all. Over time, your silence becomes more than a response to a narcissist. It becomes a lifestyle of emotional discipline. You learn to protect your energy. You learn to value your peace. You learn that your worth does not depend on someone else's approval. Most importantly, you learn that true power is not found in controlling others, but in controlling yourself. The narcissist wants access to your emotions because that access gives them influence. Your silence removes that access. Your silence disrupts their control. Your silence protects your peace. And while they may view it as resistance, it is actually the beginning of your freedom. Every moment you refuse to react unnecessarily is a moment you reclaim ownership of your mind, your emotions, and your future. That is why silence is not merely the absence of words, it is the presence of strength. One of the most important things to understand about narcissists is that they do not respond well to losing control. For a long time, they may have relied on your reactions to validate their importance, maintain influence, and keep themselves at the center of your attention. They become accustomed to a certain pattern. They say something hurtful, and you defend yourself. They create conflict, and you try to fix it. They accuse you of things you never did, and you spend hours explaining the truth. Over time, this cycle becomes predictable, and the narcissist begins to depend on it. But the moment you decide to remain silent, everything changes. Your silence creates a problem they do not know how to solve. Suddenly, the usual tactics stop working. The emotional buttons they used to push no longer produce the same response. The arguments they once started no longer develop into lengthy conversations. The confusion they created no longer traps you in endless attempts to prove yourself. This is why silence often triggers an escalation in their behavior. When narcissists lose access to the reactions they crave, they frequently increase their efforts to get one. Many people are surprised by this. They believe that if they stop responding, the narcissist will simply leave them alone. Sometimes that happens, but often there is a period where the narcissist becomes more aggressive, more manipulative, or more persistent. This is because they are testing the limits of your new boundaries. They are trying to determine whether your silence is temporary or permanent. They are asking themselves whether they still have influence over you. One of the first things they may do is intensify their communication. They may send more messages, make more phone calls, or suddenly demand explanations. A person who previously seemed indifferent may now appear unusually interested in your life. This is not always because they miss you. Often it is because they miss the control they once had. There is a significant difference between valuing a person and valuing access to a person. A narcissist frequently confuses the two. If increased communication does not work, they may attempt emotional manipulation. They may remind you of the good times. They may bring up old memories. They may suddenly express affection or concern. They may make promises about changing. These tactics can be confusing because they create hope. But it is important to pay attention not only to words but also to patterns. Genuine change requires accountability, consistency, and effort. Manipulation often requires only a well-timed emotional appeal. When emotional appeals fail, some narcissists move toward guilt. They may accuse you of being selfish, cold, uncaring, or cruel. They may suggest that your silence is causing them pain. They may attempt to make you feel responsible for their emotional state. This is a powerful tactic because many empathetic people naturally want to help others. Narcissists understand this and often use compassion as a doorway back into control. They know that if they can make you feel guilty enough, you may abandon your boundaries and return to the familiar cycle. Others may choose provocation. They may deliberately say things designed to upset you. They may insult you, criticize you, or attack your character. They are not necessarily interested in the argument itself. What they want is evidence that they can still affect you emotionally. Even a negative reaction can feel like a victory because it confirms that they still have access to your attention. Some narcissists become even more strategic. They may involve other people. They may spread rumors, distort facts, or present themselves as victims. They may tell friends, family members, or mutual acquaintances a version of events that casts them in a favorable light. This is often referred to as a smear campaign. The purpose is not always to damage your reputation. Sometimes it is simply another attempt to provoke you into responding. They hope you will become so frustrated that you break your silence and re-enter the conflict. What makes silence so powerful is that it exposes the reality of the situation. When you stop reacting, you begin to see the tactics more clearly. You start recognizing patterns that were previously hidden beneath emotional chaos. You realize that many of the conflicts were never about resolving problems. They were about maintaining control. The less you engage, the more obvious this becomes. This is why staying silent can feel difficult at first. Silence requires discipline. It requires you to resist the urge to explain yourself, defend yourself, or prove your innocence. It requires confidence in what you know to be true. There will be moments when you are tempted to respond. There will be moments when you want to correct every lie and answer every accusation. But wisdom teaches that not every battle deserves your energy. The narcissist's increased efforts are actually evidence that something important is happening. They are signs that the old system is no longer functioning. The reactions they once relied upon are disappearing. The control they once enjoyed is weakening. Your silence is creating distance between their influence and your identity. Over time, something remarkable begins to happen. The more you protect your peace, the stronger you become. The more you refuse to engage in unnecessary conflict, the clearer your thinking becomes. The more you maintain your boundaries, the more confidence you develop. Eventually, the tactics that once controlled you lose their power entirely. That is why silence is not weakness. It is strength under control. It is the ability to choose peace over chaos, wisdom over reaction, and freedom over emotional captivity. And when a narcissist realizes that their efforts no longer produce the response they desire, they are forced to confront a reality they never expected. They no longer have the power they once thought they had. One of the most significant moments in any relationship with a narcissist occurs when they realize they are losing influence over you. For a long time, their sense of control may have depended on your reactions. They knew how to push your buttons, how to provoke emotions, how to create confusion, and how to keep you engaged in endless cycles of arguments, explanations, and emotional turmoil. As long as you continued to react, they felt secure because every reaction confirmed that they still had access to your thoughts, your emotions, and your attention. But the moment you begin to withdraw from that cycle, everything changes. When you choose silence, something powerful happens. Your silence sends a message that words cannot communicate. It tells the narcissist that their usual tactics are no longer producing the same results. It tells them that their influence is weakening. It tells them that you are beginning to see things differently. To a healthy person, this might simply mean that another individual is setting boundaries and seeking peace. But to a narcissist, it often feels like a direct threat to their sense of control. The reason this affects them so deeply is because narcissists often build their self-worth around external validation and influence. They need constant reassurance that they matter, that they are important, and that they can shape the behavior of others. When someone stops reacting, stops arguing, and stops seeking their approval, the narcissist begins to experience something they dislike immensely: uncertainty. They start questioning whether their influence is fading. They begin wondering whether they still have the power they once believed they possessed. This uncertainty often creates frustration. You may notice that the narcissist suddenly becomes more aggressive in their communication. They may send messages designed to provoke you. They may criticize you more harshly. They may attempt to remind you of past mistakes. They may even create situations intended to force you into responding. The reason for these behaviors is simple. They are searching for proof that they still matter to you. They are searching for evidence that they can still control your emotions. What many people fail to realize is that narcissists often measure success not by peace, understanding, or healthy communication, but by emotional impact. If they can make you angry, they feel powerful. If they can make you cry, they feel significant. If they can make you defend yourself endlessly, they feel relevant. This is why your silence becomes so disruptive. Your silence removes the emotional feedback they have grown accustomed to receiving. Imagine a person constantly pressing a button and expecting a response. Every time they press it, something happens. Suddenly one day, the button stops working. What will they do? They will press harder. They will press more frequently. They will try different methods. Not because the button is broken, but because they are struggling to accept that their control over the outcome has disappeared. This is often what happens when a narcissist encounters your silence. There is another important reason they interpret silence as lost influence. Silence demonstrates independence. It shows that your emotional stability no longer depends on their approval or disapproval. It shows that you are capable of making decisions without their permission. It reveals that you are developing confidence in your own judgment. For a narcissist, this can be deeply unsettling because independence weakens their ability to manipulate. Many people think that freedom begins when the narcissist changes. But true freedom begins when you change. Freedom begins when you stop allowing another person's behavior to determine your emotional state. Freedom begins when you stop feeling obligated to explain yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. Freedom begins when you recognize that not every accusation deserves a response, and not every conflict deserves your participation. As your silence continues, the narcissist may become increasingly desperate to regain their position of influence. They may alternate between kindness and cruelty. One day they may praise you, and the next day they may criticize you. One moment they may act as though they miss you, and the next moment they may attack your character. These contradictions are often attempts to create confusion and pull you back into the emotional cycle they once controlled. The key is understanding that their behavior is revealing something important. It reveals that your silence is working. It reveals that your boundaries are having an effect. It reveals that your decision to protect your peace is disrupting patterns that once benefited them. Their increased efforts are often evidence that their influence is decreasing. This does not mean the journey is easy. There will be moments when you feel tempted to respond. There will be moments when you want to defend yourself, correct false accusations, or prove your point. But growth requires discipline. Every time you choose peace over unnecessary conflict, you strengthen your emotional independence. Every time you refuse to be pulled into drama, you reinforce your freedom. Eventually, something remarkable happens. The very person who once had the power to disturb your peace begins losing their ability to affect you. Their words carry less weight. Their tactics become more obvious. Their attempts to provoke you become less effective, not because they have changed, but because you have changed. You have learned that your value does not come from their approval. You have learned that your peace is worth protecting. You have learned that your silence is not weakness. It is evidence of strength, wisdom, and self-respect. And when you reach that point, you discover a truth that many people spend years trying to learn. The greatest power is not controlling others. The greatest power is controlling yourself. That is the moment when their influence fades and your freedom truly begins. One of the most predictable responses of a narcissist when they lose control over you is their attempt to control how others see you. When they can no longer manipulate your emotions, direct your decisions, or influence your behavior, they often turn their attention toward managing their image and damaging yours. This is because narcissists are deeply concerned with appearances. Their public image is often more important to them than truth itself. They want to be admired, respected, and viewed as the victim, regardless of what actually happened. The moment you stop participating in their games, they begin to realize that they are losing influence. This creates a problem for them because narcissists thrive on control. If they cannot control you directly, they may try to control the story about you. This is where false narratives, gossip, rumors, and smear campaigns often begin. Their goal is not necessarily to tell the truth. Their goal is to protect their image and maintain power. Many people are shocked when this happens. They assume that once they walk away from a narcissist, the conflict will end. Unfortunately, that is not always the case. Some narcissists see your silence as a threat because your silence exposes something they desperately want to hide. It exposes the fact that you no longer need their approval. It exposes the fact that their manipulation no longer works. And most importantly, it exposes the possibility that other people may eventually discover the truth. To prevent this, they may begin telling selective stories. Notice that narcissists rarely tell the entire story. They often present carefully edited versions of events that make them appear innocent, while making you appear unreasonable, ungrateful, cruel, or unstable. They may omit critical details. They may twist conversations. They may exaggerate your mistakes while minimizing their own behavior. They become directors of a false narrative, hoping others will accept their version of reality without question. This tactic can be incredibly painful because human beings naturally care about their reputation. We want to be understood. We want people to know the truth about who we are. When lies are spread about us, the natural reaction is to defend ourselves immediately. We feel an overwhelming urge to correct every false statement and confront every accusation. But this is exactly where wisdom becomes necessary. You must understand that not every accusation deserves a response. Not every rumor deserves your attention. Not every attack deserves your energy. If you spend your life chasing every lie someone tells about you, you will become exhausted. You will waste valuable time trying to manage opinions that were never under your control in the first place. A narcissist often wants you to react. They want you to become emotional. They want you to enter endless arguments and debates because every reaction gives them more material to use against you. They can point to your frustration as evidence that you are the problem. They can use your anger to support their narrative. This is why emotional discipline is one of the greatest weapons you possess. The truth has a unique quality. It does not require constant maintenance. Lies require continuous effort because they must constantly be protected. A person who is telling the truth can remain consistent. A person who is lying must continually adjust their story as new circumstances arise. Over time, contradictions begin to appear. People start noticing inconsistencies. The mask begins to slip. This does not mean everyone will immediately see the truth. Some people may believe the narcissist's version of events for a season. Some people may misunderstand you. Some relationships may even be lost. But one of the greatest signs of maturity is learning that you cannot control what everyone thinks about you. You can only control your character, your actions, and your integrity. People who truly know you will eventually recognize the difference between your character and the false image being presented. Your consistency will speak louder than accusations. Your integrity will speak louder than rumors. Your behavior will speak louder than gossip. Time has a way of revealing what emotion tries to hide. There is also an important lesson hidden within this experience. When a narcissist launches a smear campaign, they unknowingly reveal their own insecurity. Secure people do not spend their lives destroying the reputations of others. Confident people do not need to recruit an audience to validate their version of reality. Healthy individuals focus on growth, accountability, and resolution. Narcissists often focus on image management because they fear exposure. This is why your focus must remain on your healing rather than their attacks. Continue building your life. Continue growing. Continue pursuing your goals. Continue protecting your peace. Do not allow someone else's obsession with controlling the narrative to distract you from your future. Remember that your purpose is greater than public opinion. Your destiny is too important to be held hostage by rumors. Every minute you spend trying to convince people who are determined to misunderstand you is a minute stolen from your growth. The greatest response to false narratives is often a life well lived. As you continue moving forward, you will discover something powerful. The people who matter most will eventually see your character. The people who genuinely care about truth will observe your actions. And those who are committed to believing lies would likely have found a reason to judge you regardless. So refuse to let fear of gossip control your decisions. Refuse to let false accusations steal your peace. Refuse to let someone else's narrative become your identity. Stand firm in who you are. Walk in integrity. Remain consistent. Let your life become the evidence. In the end, character outlasts rumors, truth outlasts deception, and integrity outlasts every smear campaign. One of the most uncomfortable experiences for a narcissist is being left alone with their own thoughts. This is something many people fail to understand because they assume narcissists are completely confident and secure. On the surface, they may appear strong, powerful, and self-assured. They may project an image of superiority and act as though they are unaffected by criticism or rejection. But beneath that carefully constructed image often lies a deep need for validation, attention, and control. The image they present to the world requires constant maintenance, and much of that maintenance comes from the reactions and emotional energy of the people around them. When you constantly engage with a narcissist, whether through arguments, explanations, defending yourself, or trying to make them understand your perspective, you are providing them with attention. Even negative attention can serve as fuel. Every argument becomes proof that they still occupy space in your mind. Every emotional reaction reassures them that they still have influence over your emotions. Every attempt to gain their approval reinforces their position of power. But something significant happens when you become silent. When you stop arguing, stop defending, stop chasing explanations, and stop participating in their games, the source of that emotional supply begins to disappear. Suddenly, they are no longer receiving the same level of attention and validation. The energy they once drew from you is no longer available. This creates a void, and that void can become deeply uncomfortable for them. Silence removes distractions. It eliminates the constant cycle of conflict that allows them to avoid looking inward. Many narcissists spend a great deal of time focusing on the flaws, mistakes, and weaknesses of others. By keeping attention directed outward, they avoid examining themselves. They become experts at identifying problems in other people while remaining blind to their own behavior. But when you withdraw your participation, they lose one of the distractions that help them maintain that focus. This is why your silence can have a greater impact than any argument ever could. An argument allows the narcissist to continue the game. It gives them an opportunity to twist facts, shift blame, and create confusion. But silence offers no battlefield. There is no conflict to manipulate. There is no conversation to control. There is no emotional reaction to exploit. Instead, they are left facing the reality that someone they once controlled is no longer responding. For many narcissists, this creates frustration because control is closely connected to their sense of security. They feel powerful when they can influence how others think, feel, and behave. They feel important when people constantly seek their approval or react to their actions. When that influence begins to disappear, it challenges the image they have built about themselves. This does not mean they will suddenly become self-aware and take responsibility for their actions. In fact, many narcissists will do everything possible to avoid that outcome. They may seek attention elsewhere. They may attempt to provoke a reaction from you. They may create drama, spread rumors, or try new tactics to regain access to your emotions. Why? Because your silence forces them to confront something they desperately want to avoid, the possibility that they are no longer in control. What makes this so powerful is that you do not have to fight to achieve it. You do not have to prove your point. You do not have to win an argument. You simply stop participating in a system that was designed to drain you. At the same time, something remarkable begins happening inside of you. The energy you once spent managing the narcissist's emotions can now be invested in your own growth. The time you once spent explaining yourself can be used to build your future. The mental space that was occupied by constant conflict becomes available for healing, learning, and personal development. Many people underestimate how much emotional energy narcissistic relationships consume. They become so accustomed to the chaos that they forget what peace feels like. They become so focused on managing someone else's behavior that they neglect their own well-being. Silence breaks that cycle. It creates room for recovery. As you continue choosing peace over conflict, you begin seeing things more clearly. The manipulation that once confused you becomes obvious. The patterns that once trapped you become visible. The approval you once chased becomes less important. Your confidence starts to return because you are no longer measuring your worth through someone else's opinions. The narcissist may never understand why you stopped participating. They may never admit their behavior. They may never accept responsibility for the damage they caused. But your healing does not require their understanding. Your freedom does not require their permission. The greatest victory is not changing the narcissist. The greatest victory is changing your relationship with their influence. It is reaching a point where their words no longer determine your mood, their opinions no longer define your value, and their actions no longer control your peace. When your silence removes their ability to manipulate your emotions, they are left with something they cannot easily escape, themselves. And while they wrestle with the loss of influence, you gain something far more valuable: clarity, strength, confidence, and the freedom to move forward with your life. That is why silence is not merely the absence of words. It is the presence of wisdom, self-respect, and personal power. One of the greatest misunderstandings people have about silence is that they see it as weakness. They assume that if you are not defending yourself, arguing back, or proving your point, then you must be afraid. But true silence is often one of the highest forms of strength. It takes far more discipline to remain calm than it does to react emotionally. Anyone can lose control. Anyone can become angry. Anyone can be pulled into conflict. But it takes wisdom, maturity, and self-respect to choose peace when chaos is demanding your attention. When dealing with a narcissist, silence becomes much more than simply refusing to speak. It becomes a declaration. It says, I refuse to participate in a cycle that is destroying my peace. It says, I value my emotional health more than I value winning an argument. It says, I will no longer allow another person's behavior to determine my state of mind. This is why silence becomes so powerful. It is not about what you are withholding from the narcissist. It is about what you are giving to yourself. Many people spend years trapped in emotional exhaustion because they constantly feel the need to explain themselves. They want the narcissist to understand their intentions. They want fairness. They want honesty. They want accountability. But the problem is that narcissists often use communication as a tool of control rather than a path to understanding. Conversations become endless circles. Arguments repeat themselves. Problems never get resolved because the goal is not resolution. The goal is to keep you engaged. The moment you recognize this, you begin to understand the value of silence. You stop wasting energy on battles that have no finish line. You stop trying to convince someone who has already decided not to listen. You stop sacrificing your peace for the approval of someone who benefits from your confusion. Silence creates space for healing. When you are constantly defending yourself, your mind is occupied with survival. Your thoughts become consumed by what the narcissist said, what they meant, what they might do next, and how you should respond. This mental occupation steals your focus. It steals your creativity. It steals your confidence. It steals your joy. But when you choose silence, something remarkable begins to happen. Your mind starts clearing. The emotional noise begins to fade. You begin to hear your own thoughts again. You begin to trust your own judgment again. You begin to reconnect with the person you were before the manipulation, before the confusion, and before the constant emotional battles. This is why silence is not passive. It is active. It is a deliberate decision to redirect your energy. Every ounce of energy you stop investing in dysfunction becomes available for your growth. Suddenly, you have more time to pursue your goals. You have more emotional strength to invest in healthy relationships. You have more mental clarity to focus on your purpose. What once went into defending yourself can now go into developing yourself. Narcissists often want you trapped in reaction mode because a reactive person is easier to control. When someone can predict your emotions, they can influence your behavior. But silence breaks that pattern. Silence makes you unpredictable. It removes their ability to manipulate your responses. It forces them to realize that they no longer have access to the emotional buttons they once pushed so easily. At first, this may feel uncomfortable. There may be moments when you desperately want to respond. You may want to correct false accusations. You may want to expose the truth. You may want to defend your character. These feelings are natural. But maturity teaches you that not every attack deserves a response. Not every misunderstanding requires clarification. Not every battle deserves your participation. The strongest people are not those who fight every conflict. The strongest people are those who know which conflicts are worth their energy. They understand that peace is a resource. Time is a resource. Emotional strength is a resource. And they refuse to waste these valuable resources on situations that offer no growth and no resolution. As your silence continues, your confidence grows. You begin to realize that your worth is not determined by another person's opinion. You stop seeking validation from people who cannot give it. You stop chasing acceptance from people committed to misunderstanding you. Instead, you begin building a life based on truth, purpose, and self-respect. Over time, silence transforms from a strategy into a lifestyle. It teaches patience. It teaches emotional intelligence. It teaches self-control. Most importantly, it teaches freedom. Freedom from manipulation. Freedom from constant stress. Freedom from the exhausting need to prove yourself. The greatest gift silence gives you is the opportunity to rediscover your own value. For too long, many people measure themselves through the eyes of the narcissist. They question their abilities, their character, and their worth because they have been conditioned to seek approval from someone who constantly withholds it. But silence breaks that dependency. It creates distance from the lies and allows truth to grow. Eventually, you reach a point where the narcissist no longer occupies your thoughts. Their words lose power. Their tactics lose effectiveness. Their attempts to provoke you no longer work. Not because they changed, but because you changed. You became stronger. You became wiser. You became more focused on your future than on their behavior. That is why silence becomes your path to freedom and strength. It is not an escape from reality. It is a return to reality. It is the decision to stop giving away your power and start investing it in your purpose. And when you do that consistently, you discover something life-changing. The peace you were searching for was never in changing the narcissist. It was in reclaiming yourself.